So on the first, you're absolutely right that this would take years. And indeed, that's what the WTO system was meant to do, to provide some time for cooling off, but make sure that a resolution would be arrived at within a reasonable amount of time. One of the major changes since the earlier treaty from the GATT in 1947 is to make these disputes go much more quickly. So actually, it really shouldn't take too long in the kind of glacial span of these sorts of disputes. That said, on the second point, I think that WTO would absolutely want to get involved. Actually, with the big worry in the trade circles is that we're moving to unilateralism rather than multilateral resolution of disputes.
Because the Trump administration is using national security as a reason for imposing tariffs on steel imports from, Mexico, Canada, the European Union, and China. But that would put the WTO in a position to rule on what constitutes U.S. national security. And we should be talking about trade and not national security at the WTO.
That's absolutely right. And that's why this invocation of national security is so troubling. There is, of course, an exception in the WTO agreements for actions taken in a very limited set of national security situations, particularly here in times of war, preparation for war, et cetera. And it's often considered to be in some way a type of justification for which the WTO should be highly deferential to the state's determinations about national security. So granted, the WTO appellate body, the dispute resolution body, does not want to be in the business of adjudicating a national security concern. But that said, if a justification based on national security can be made for steel imports from Canada, or what's now being investigated, auto imports from Canada, from Europe, then what wouldn't be a national security concern? So at a certain point, the WTO and multilateral system has to get involved. Otherwise, this becomes a get-out-of-jail-free card for anybody who wants to cheat the system.
Legally speaking, do you think that the Trump administration has a case?
It's difficult to say that they do. From where I'm sitting, there's a difficult case in even domestic U.S. law. It's not entirely clear that the Section 232 statute entitles the president to say anything and everything as a national security concern. But putting that to the side, which is more complicated, under the WTO agreement, this has never been litigated. What constitutes national security has never been litigated, and who gets to decide when a national security concern is present has never been litigated. It's coming up in a few cases now, and certainly this U.S. steel and aluminum tariffs will be one of them. But it should be noted that very few states, including, of course, the United States and Russia, suggest that only the state invoking the national security exception can determine authoritatively whether or not the exception applies. States like the European Union, entities like the European Union, Canada, Japan, they don't hold that position. So it's not at all clear who should be deciding the issue.